mean, they're starting to gather before they take off for their, they didn't quite go to Siberia, but they go somewhere over that north area. But it's powerful when you feel that energy of those murmuration. There's hundreds of them. They start to gather like before tax day is all I remember. And they slowly, it goes from 100 to 200, 300, 400, 500. And then they decide this is the day and they all go. And when I first saw Shirley's work, I was like, it had that same feeling for me in this body of work where, you know, that swirling energy. And I was very moved by it. And I first saw her work, Shirley and I have known each other maybe, well, since the late 90s. And, but I got to see this new series of work maybe a year or two ago, a couple of years ago, through our group we do together. We do a studio group together. And some of them she was drawing in it, and then she'd go off and be doing her woods and forest drawings and paintings, and then she'd come back to the net. And I just watched over the couple of years, this exploration, this beautiful exploration of the net, you know, and so I feel really blessed to be able to have this exhibit in here, in this space. It has a lot of power for me in movement and light and all those things I like, and it also has a lot of some beautiful originality. You can tell this artist really got in touch with what she is about. And that's a rare and beautiful thing, why we keep having exhibits and why artists keep making art, you know. So I'm not going to talk that much anymore. I swear. So Shirley is, I'm so happy to have her here, and usually in these artist talks what we do is she'll maybe talk a little bit about, you know, where she's from and her work, and then we'll have a Q&A afterwards, so it'd be great if you just save your questions till after. And anyway, so welcome to Shirley. We just love having your work in this show, and thanks for being with us. And did you want to start? Maybe tell us a little bit about where you're from. You're not from Seattle, and you're a little bit about that and how you got into the arts.
Thanks, Margie. I am originally from the Kansas City area. And just immediately started thinking about the thinker in front of the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City. My father used to make these jokes that we'd go look at Christmas lights and we'd see that statue and he'd say, "What do you think he's thinking about?" I grew up in a big family, 7 siblings, and I'm one of the younger children, and I think when my father realized he could have one child that would keep quiet with a praying watercolor set, and that's where it started. It was just like, yeah, and then it was like, oh gosh, it's covering the kitchen table. Yeah, and then I got a card table, it was mine. But there's a point that I want to make about this other than just saying, you know, I'm from a family where neither of my parents have a college education. My father went up to 8th grade in a Catholic school in north central Kansas. I had a few things that happened young in life that helped move my career on, but they weren't anything along the lines of being directed in the world of the arts. I, One was that one summer I broke my arm, and my mother was livid, absolutely livid that I broke my arm, and I was like, and she said, "You are not staying around this house all summer long." I said, "There's an art camp up the block, you know."
That's perfect.
Yeah.
What a great
Then I
girl.
realized she didn't care about me being on the swim team, and I could keep making this art. And then next, my sister 2 years older than me got expelled from Catholic school. And when she got expelled, I asked my dad if I could go to a different school too, and he was like, "Not the same one Carol goes to." And so I was sent to a public school that had 4 art teachers
Wow.
in junior high and high school.
Wow.
And this was all due to Hallmark cards.
Oh, wow.
You know, they funded the arts, they funded this incredible lecture series at the University of Kansas. When I was a young woman, I got to meet Joan Brown and Judy Chicago and
Wow.
Agnes Martin, and they, you know, it was just, you know, this
Hallmark.
tumbling of weird events that, you know, I went off to college, and so I went to the University of Kansas in Lawrence and studied with a number of just really precious artists. I still have very fond memories of my landscape painting teacher. He never would go in the art building. He'd drive up in a big van, and we'd all get in it and he'd drive us out in the country. But and I had never, you know, like thought about the contemporary art world of, you know, like we have today. I'm sure there's some contemporary art galleries in Kansas City area now, but you know, I never thought about these issues that so many of the young people are concerned with. It wasn't so much later that it was like, I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to make this work somehow. You know, this isn't. You know, this isn't easy.
Yeah, as
So-
far as keep doing it in income, and how do you live this life? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, but that landscape painting teacher had a big influence on me, and Joan Brown had a big influence on me. These real polar, different people, you know. But she was the first woman who, well, you know, when I was in school, I only experienced, you know, well, abstract expressionism or pop art, and that was the big debate between the
That's
professors.
right, which is like, who's gonna win?
Yeah, and then there was this plein air landscape professor I had as well. You know, but Joan Brown was a woman who was making art about her life. And I loved her work, and she was making art about, you know, swimming to Alcatraz. And it's like, so she, you know, it was one of the first women I met who, you know, made me realize, oh, I can tell my story in my work. And that's really important, you know, because that wasn't the message I was getting in college.
No.
Yeah.
And is that in like undergrad?
Yeah,
BFA work?
undergrad, it was probably 1975. Yeah, that I met Joan Brown.
Yeah. Wow.
So, I just got to see that fabulous show in
It's in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And then did you go right into get your master's? No, you took some time.
Yeah, no, my father, again, talk about him a lot, but I was really good in calculus and algebra and mathematics, and when I said, well, I'm studying art, it was over. He not only it was like, no, I'm not helping you with this. And when I went ahead to do, then it was like, I'm not even talking to you. And so there's a long estrangement that really hurt my feelings. And I didn't understand why, you know.
Wow.
You know, but I mean, I knew he was being really practical, but I didn't understand how rejected I felt by that. But I found it to be a really important life lesson, you know.
As far as it was
Well,
an impetus then, or what?
Well, that you know,
I'm gonna show you.
if I know that I've never relied on people liking my work.
Oh yeah. That is a huge lesson.
Yeah.
And to have all the people around you saying, "Go for it, Shirley, we believe in you." I mean, it's great to hear that, but like, you know, we have to call on other voices sometimes. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Ah,
So yeah, there was 6 years after I finished college, and I was very involved in environmental issues. I was a little protester for the nuclear silos that were being put in Kansas. And, I worked for a bit in one of the very first organic and local food cooperatives. And that was my life for the years after college, and I never thought about going to school again until it was like, why can't have these two different focuses? This isn't working. This is, you know, these are two I have to pick. And so I deliberately went to graduate school with the intention of getting well educated enough that I could get a teaching job. And that's what I thought I could do. You know, and that's what women did at that time. They were nurses, or they taught, or they, you know, like, but,
or got married.
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, yeah, and then you ended up, where were you in grad school?
Oh, I went to, I love making prints and printmaking, and I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Oh, okay.
Which at that time really was the top printmaking school in the country. And I knew this because this is back in the day with no computers, so you had to actually look at school catalogs at the local library. But when I was trying to find a school that had a woman taught, that was a professor, I kept coming across the printmaking professors are all educated at Madison. And so it was strategic. It was one of the very few strategic things I did with my life.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
and it was like intense education. It was good.
And that's what brought you to Seattle then, after you graduated, to teach
Yeah.
at the university.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, do you want to talk for a minute about, and so that was a long time teaching then.
Oh yeah.
30 years almost of teaching there. Do you want to talk for a minute about, because these are paintings, about what you might call like that hinge from printmaking to painting? Like, are there specific times that you remembered when you were a printmaker and teaching printmaking? Were you like sometimes longing to paint, or was it something that was always in the back of your mind, or did you always, was it part of retirement and leaving printmaking in some sort of way?
Well, I never saw, because my undergraduate degree was in painting, I never saw for myself printmaking separate from painting or separate from the history of painting. And, you know, when I went to museums, I looked at paintings and I looked at prints by Rembrandt, and I looked at artists for conceptual reasons. There were, I like those materials so much. I love pushing it a tool through wood and etching plates. But my mature work, and when I came to Seattle, one of the most influential things regarding printmaking was seeing prints made by Rembrandt, prints made by Picasso, prints made in this kind of sequential, generative way, where I set aside the necessity of reproduction.
Okay.
And I would work on a copper plate and print it and then change the copper plate and alter it
Okay.
to come up with another state.
Okay, yeah.
And then again and again,
Yeah.
another state. And Spafford kept saying, Michael Spafford, he passed away not too long ago,
Yeah.
but he was one of my colleagues, and senior colleagues.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, you could do this in painting. You actually, what you're doing, you're really a painter. And
Yeah. It's not the traditional way to be a printmaker. It's like usually printmakers make additions of
Well, there's a new, I still look at printmaking books. There's a new printmaking book out that the gallery in Philadelphia had it on their website, but it's the Women of Atelier 17. That was a workshop in Paris.
In Paris, yeah.
And so many of the artists that were in Paris at that time were very much influenced by Surrealism.
Yeah.
But Louise Bourgeois and also Joan Mitchell. And
I've seen some of those.
yeah, I read a description and seen reproductions of, in books of their work, and it's like they had, like, they were gonna just do whatever they wanted.
Right.
And, you know, it's like, they utilized the materials and methods to make it the way
Like
they
you did, yeah.
Yeah, and so, there are
That's
other
cool.
people in the world that, but a big one was, you know, Picasso would do those sequences in lithograph, in lithography, which, where he would start with a bowl usually or something like that, and then print it, and I think they printed more than one of each state, but then the next state he
Right.
will have altered and changed it.
Right.
You know, so there were things
Yeah.
that, you know, through having a background in painting, you know, and you know, it's like I was receptive to this other approach, and well, makes sense to me.
Yes.
Because, and then,
Was that like part of your leaving university then? Was it then you started to actively
well, I started
after you retired?
doing a lot with drawing, works on paper, drawing and painting on paper. It started around, I don't know, before.
Yeah.
I went to some workshops in color theory at Anderson Ranch,
Huh.
which kind of, you know, late in life
Cool.
to think about going to workshops, but it's a pretty incredible
Not a
place.
deadline on that, you know.
It's a great place.
Huh.
And
Cool.
I just immediately, like, I don't know, it was like I'd paint the whole piece of paper one color or two colors, and then I'd cut it, start cutting them up and rearrange it. You know, it wasn't, it still wasn't painting, but it was, to me, it was painting.
Yeah.
You know, painting paper and then collaging it together. So
Yeah.
there were some intermediate steps between
Yeah.
printmaking and
It's never just a,
yeah.
straight line.
I did some of my narrative work as paintings. There is
Yeah.
some of that still.
Oh,
Well,
well, talk to
it's
us.
in the closet.
We're not getting that work out yet. So talk to us a little bit then about specifically like this body of work, the nets, and where do the nets, where are those nets coming in your life? Outside, of course, Shirley lives in Port Townsend now, and is around the water
And also, I've sailed with my husband for more than 20 years, in and out of marinas, and they'd always separate the pleasure boats from the fishing trawlers and all that, but I always wanted to go over there and like look at all their gear. There was something about the shape of things and the lines and the, I decided that I could not get my feelings and ideas about the environment across in these little works. Well, you have one of the first shoreline pieces, that little print.
I bought straight out of her studio back in, whenever we met, and back in the 90s,
I just, it was too small of a space. I did try to make some larger etchings, messing around with copper that was, 28 by 38 inches, and somehow I wanted to get, and I just thought, okay, I'm gonna just build this canvas, built some 5 by 6 foot canvas like that, and I just started splashing around with color, and I just, it was messy, and it was all the kind of colors that I would remember from, different sunrises and sunsets and the water, and it was, and then I was like, well, so what? So that, but I looked at it for a month or two, and then one day went up and just painted a net into that image. And then I had to revise it and change it, and so there were several years between like 2016 to when I first started doing the gouache on paper, where I kept trying to depict the net, and I actually would have nets draped around and thinking about like how I could draw and and then I would turn it upside down so it would. And then one day I just took one of those nets and soaked it and threw it
right on there.
And there it was. It was like, oh wow,
that's easier.
Isn't that
easier
cool?
than drawing it.
It was cool. Well, there was something that the three-dimensionality of a net, and then it also can be very two-dimensional, like a grid.
Yeah.
And then, it can flow this way, but then you throw it down on a piece of paper like that, you can see the three-dimensionality of it, but on a flat piece of paper.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, that just
lit
me up. All right.
This makes me happy. I get that. It's so funny. And like, you just have to be in the studio. You just have to spend time. Because if you're not in the studio, that thing might not happen. It's not like it's like not a big mystery always. It's just like, you have to present yourself and be in the studio and just keep working or doing whatever you're doing. And then something clicks sometimes. Yeah.
Would it be okay if I showed them?
Yeah.
The first ones?
Please. there's portfolios back there with drawings and other, oh, I don't think we have the drawings, but we have the washi paper that she first started with.
Well, here, this one's the one that they have on top.
Oh,
here.
come up here, Shirley. if you
Okay.
don't mind. I'll hold it while you talk
All
about
right.
it.
There you go, that's one of the first nets I threw down.
And I remember seeing a picture of this during one of our studio visits.
Well, let's see, what can I say about it? I had, well, the reason there are these little tags on it like this, is that I had these in the studio, pinned up on the wall for a while. They were like companion, like friends, like, that's where the idea came from, now where are you gonna go with it? And so everything in this body of work that you see and the couple years of works on paper, I made just with the net and sponges. Oh, no, that's not true. The one Marty's holding, there's some little paintbrush down there.
I remember when you were doing these, like, you knew it was kind of about water, but you didn't know how the water was gonna present itself in the
Right.
work.
Yeah,
And sometimes she'd make these little wave things,
yeah.
or early things,
Uh-huh.
and then you happen to feel the water without even, you don't have to represent it.
Right, yeah, that's
That's
what
how
I
I
wanted
see
to
it.
get to. Here,
Yeah.
I'll let you put it away for me.
Here, I'll take that. Thanks, Mike.
She's not talking, do you have a question?
I'll see if I, yeah, we should open it up. I was gonna see if, yeah. That's a,
Was there something else you wanted me
I
to
just
tell
wanna
you?
make that, like, cause I always learn a lot when the artists come here and talk, and I think I know them really well, and then there's all these things I didn't know. But, they're so present in your work, like, in the way that you, when you're talking about, when you, after you got your bachelor's degree and then you went and worked for environmental causes, I'm like, wow, that's so Shirley, I didn't know that, but that's so Shirley to do that, you know? And then your work, it's, visually when I see your work, it's about the environment and about you. And that's just really, I don't know, it's just really great to see that and hear that when you talk about that, because you're very present in your work, and that's not always the case for artists. Anyway, I appreciate that about it, so, yeah.
Well, yeah, I bring an energy back from being in nature to my studio. It's that energy that I want to share. But there's also something that I've become very aware of in recent years, more clearly of what it is like when I go walking, or when we've been on the boat, or in the forest especially. There's something about the forest lately where I just feel like for the first time I own my own self. I own my own body. So there's a kind of physical sensation that that's really important to me to bring to the work.
Yeah, yeah, I can get that completely. Yeah. Well, let's open it up to any questions. Anybody?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your talk today and for hosting this talk today. It's wonderful to have an insight into your work, because it is sort of repellent to, like, it's, what I mean is it's difficult to interpret because of the abstraction, right? So it's sort of, pushes interpretation away in a certain sense. But in another way, it's pulling you in because it's figurative as well, with the nets being the way they are. But the one question I sort of have is about, there's sort of two questions, and one is that the show is called Netting the Wind, and yet I see so much water in this. So could you speak to that?
I almost called it netting the water. And I thought that was would have been more accurate or appropriate. When I landed on netting the wind, is that I wanted to give a clue to a spirituality. And in indigenous culture, often God is spoken about as the wind. It's just like the wind, you know,
Wow.
it's there. Sometimes you feel it more, or you feel it less. And it was just my nod to that.
Oh, that's fascinating.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you. And then the other level of that, you might have already answered it, but in reading your bio, the explanation for just the one sheet
Oh,
that's back there. So you talk about what you just mentioned, having the somatic experience and bringing that back to the studio, and yet these are manifestations of a spiritual quest. So the somatic experience and yet the spiritual quest. Could you speak to that?
Well, I'm really committed to a yoga practice, and I don't separate my physicality from whatever it is. I have no idea who or what it is.
Mhm.
That sense of that there's something really powerful about this
Mhm.
life that we live, and that's a great question.
That's a very beautiful answer. Thank you.
Okay. Good.
That's very beautiful.
Yeah, I go like, how long do you want to be here? Thank you very much
We
for
can
your
talk
question.
later.
Thank you for your questions, I appreciate it. Anything else?
Who's your favorite landscape artist?
Oh my goodness, gosh. I probably would have to still say Robert Sudlow, my teacher, and and it's probably because he painted the really beautiful parts of Kansas that always get, at any rate, there are some amazingly beautiful parts of Kansas. I think beyond that, it would be really hard for me to answer that question. I have a couple artist friends besides Margie that Sue Danielson and Tim Cross, who demanded of me to say that my work was landscape painting. And I think their work is remotely, on a visual level, remotely landscape, but they're totally influenced by the environment. And I think that's something that's come up pretty strongly for me, is that, I don't know, you think of those Corot and I'm happy to,
Your
well,
light,
Joan Mitchell.
Joan Mitchell, but your light is so, you get such capture beautiful light in these that can be like a Corot or like the Hudson Valley School and stuff like that, which you see in the landscape, like you were talking about how you, the sunsets, you were thinking of the sunsets and being on the water. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite in this series, or are they like your children, you love them all?
Do I have a favorite?
In this
Favorite in the
series,
series?
did
Oh.
did I take it down? I moved a couple of the pieces.
She rearranged it since the opening, and I came in and I'm like, it's different. But I thought it was beautiful. Marty wanted to give a nod to the works on paper.
I wanted people to see more of that.
Oh.
So there was another piece here, I can bring it out if you want me to. Is that your favorite?
Well, I'm gonna have to say it probably is because
I'll bring it out,
of
show you.
what happened when I was working on it. Because I had this idea, of what I wanted to do, and I'm not totally predetermined, but there was something that I wanted to have, and it just like wasn't cooperating. And so I just kept trying to work on it more and more. It was clearly turning into something other than what I,
Yeah,
and then I just thought, well, this is perfect. I mean, this is what I
yeah.
want from my art is
I'll
for
bring it out
to
and
for me. So, then the canvas started giving me all kinds of trouble. For whatever reason, it got all wobbly. And so I had my dear friend here,
And I'm gonna
he
add,
stretched it for me.
and I'm gonna add a couple comments here too because, oh, sorry.
Oh, look, you can see the handprints in the back.
And I'm gonna add because when I saw this with the rest of Shirley's work, as an outside eye, I had seen her work develop. And then this was in the show and I had it hanging here, and then when I thought, I want people to see more of the paper paintings on the wall. And the reason I chose this one to take down was I thought this was the beginning of where you're going next.
Oh, lovely.
I thought, and I don't want to make that means you have to do this next.
Wow.
But no, as a curator, it's like this is Shirley and it's part of this, but it's already over here somewhere.
It is one of the most recent.
And so that's why I chose that one.
Oh, interesting.
But there it is. So, yeah,
I like that paper piece over there a lot.
I love that too.
It's
What's my
one of the
concept?
last paper pieces that I've done, and I actually want to go back to doing some more work on paper, but I call it my companion because I kept it available for me to see. I just needed it to help me know the direction I wanted to go. It communicated a kind of an interaction of forms that is quite different than a lot of the other work. Well, this one bears more similarity to that one in that of the interaction of forms. Then there's the constellation of nets over here that's a little bit along those lines. But in most all of them, there's the relationship, let's see how to say this, is between this complexity of the net and the net being up close. A contrast between that and this quieter, empty space. And that comes up real well in one of the other ones you took down and put somewhere else.
It's right over there. I know, I should have more wall space, shouldn't I?
Yeah. But,
That's the
but
issue.
Glimmer is like that, that
Glimmer's like
little,
that, the second green one,
and then,
you get so much space and breathing in that, yeah.
and then the soft sway that is next to that is also that complexity
Yeah,
in contrast to a simplicity that is out there for us. Yes.
Of those on the wall, which was the first to finish and which was the last?
Oh my, let's see. Well, these two, of course, preceded all the paintings, as did that paper one. But in terms of the paintings, well, the way I work on these is often on this, I have this big table, and the canvas lays on top of that, and I cast the net over that surface. Then I have to leave it there to dry. So there's often 3 or 4 in the works at the same time, and my studio has turned into a studio of many, many tables. And so, but
you think this towards the end?
that's one of the last. And soft sway, the biggest, the last one on that wall, is one of the last. And then also Sunshall.
In the middle?
Yes, towards the end.
Oh,
The one in the middle there.
yeah.
This one is one of the earliest to get going. But it confused me so much because, again, it went off, and something happened that, well, the surface that's primarily the yellow became much more solid looking to me, almost like it seemed like a rock surface, as opposed to some of the, more luminous,
Kind of airy,
airy.
looking flat.
And I was like, but I've already started, and it's like, this is what it is. So I probably, like, inch by inch, in a way, it took me the longest to conclude. I did these small additions, and I was like, that's not quite enough, but it's stood in the studio against the wall for months and months. I don't know which.
So
Yeah.
that kind of raises a question, other artists I've talked to sometimes have difficulty with this. How do you know when a painting is done? How do you know when a piece of art is done?
Oh, good question. Yeah. Well, wow. Will you answer that one?
Alexander Calder said it was when his wife told him it was time for lunch. But
There are certain.
we don't have wives fixing our lunch for us. We're just like lost.
Yes, so therefore we're lost.
It's really hard because
Yeah.
what is art but not, it's everything about choices.
Yeah.
What's your next mark? What's your next thing? Blah, blah, on like that. And then that's like,
I have ways that I test my paintings by turning them upside down.
yeah.
And looking at them for a long time that way. We have a mantle in our living room, and I often will bring a canvas up to the house and put it on that mantle. And then I see it I've just woken up and there's that painting. I then see it at different perspectives from different points, and
Mhm.
get, you know, my own.
I do that too. And then sometimes I'll even hang it in my bedroom for a while and see
Mhm.
what I think. And I
Mhm.
mean, I'm not thinking, but I'm living with it.
Mhm.
And in your studio, it's the same. I might just be leaning against a wall, and it just doesn't bother you anymore. Sometimes that's what it is. Yeah. Yeah. In some ways.
So,
That's a hard one.
like a piece, like this large piece here, what's like the progression of that piece? Like what do you start with and what do you end with? If that's not proprietary.
I would say with this one, there was somewhat of a, underlay, well, because it is underneath now, but the beginning point was just finding this fluidity. So I think this was one of the first marks here. There are these softer nets, definitely came early on. This little piece was early on, but like the softer net, it goes around quite a bit throughout the canvas.
And is that wet? The canvas is wet sometimes, right, when you're putting it on?
For this, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was wet. And I have I used some absorbent ground on the canvas surface so that it will hold the water in place rather than slide away from me. And, but here, it was printed on dry. That was dry. And then sometimes, I think this was dry, but then I wanted to have it soften, and so I have a mister and misted portions of it, so it would, because you see how there's a clarity over here, and then it softens, and I wanted it to soften into that area.
You don't have a preliminary general sketch or idea that you're starting with, or do you kind of have a general kind of preliminary sketch or composition? Or do you just go in at that canvas?
I was wondering the same thing, and also if you do a color study first.
I only worked with 3 colors. I mean, 1 blue, 1 red, 1 yellow. I don't mess with anything other than those. Things can't get too far out of control then. You know, so no color studies, although one will influence another, you know. Where I realized earlier on, it seemed like a lot more of them were like glimmer over there that's a little bit more muted. And a lot of the works on paper were much more muted. And I thought, well, challenge yourself with, you know, some just pure color rather than, you know, pushing. It was hard for me to do this bright blue down there like that. You tend to want to, you know, stay in these ranges of muted greens and muted blues. And even this red is more of a rosy gray. So, yeah. No, I don't try to plan anything. I feel like for what I'm trying to do, that it's really like a chance to discover, you know, something that I wasn't planning on. And sometimes when it was like, oh, okay, I know how this one's gonna work out. And I will dedicate myself to, then in enhancing that idea or perfecting it, or, it's like make sure, there's enough variations or, but I like to be surprised in my work, really do.
That's great.
I feel like then there's another, it's like there's a whole nother person working with me, or, start to move around the room.
Anybody else, any questions? Well, thank you so much, Shirley. That was really enlightening and great.
Thanks. And thank you all so much for your kind attention.
That's really interesting.